Hey everybody, so I'm going to walk through Module 1 and Module 2 of the paper pencil test that you can find on the College Board. This is practice test number 10, so don't be alarmed. There are 27 questions that we see here because that's how it's formatted for the paper test. I like to use these tests for students so that they can get used to the formatting of the test before we really dive deep into practice. And what we're going to use this for today is to show you this very new strategy that I've come up with for my students, especially the students in math who are just, really down in the 400s or even 500 range and just trying to consistently score over 600, 650. I have found that using these two strategies, my students are moving their scores up from the 400s to consistently over 650 without a lot of stress. So let's talk about exactly how that works. So what are these two strategies first and foremost? So these two strategies are Desmos, right? So I'm going to say Desmos. And by Desmos, I mean you're going to figure out, I'm going to show you exactly how to know which questions utilize Desmos. And the questions that we're going to say that utilize Desmos are the questions that are single variable equations, right? So single variable equations. I'll just write single variable. We also have two variable equations, so anything where we see x and y, but sometimes this test will use different variables, right? A and B, C and D, D and R for distance and rate. We're not going to let that confuse us. We're going to still treat those like double or two variable questions. And then the second or the third thing under Desmos is we're going to look at short questions. So there's kind of like word problems, but they contain an equation up top, right? So equation provided, and we'll say equation provided above word problem, right? So we're going to pay attention to those three things, and we're going to use Desmos for all three of those types of questions that we see. The second type is what I call diagram. In fact, let me use a different color. So the second type of question that we will answer to consistently score over 650 with really a little bit of stress, right? Like not a lot of stress at all, is diagram questions. These are questions where the question itself provides a visual. So I'm gonna say provides visual. Right, so that could be it provides a triangle, a square, a circle, a graph, really any question that provides a visual, we're going to go straight to diagram. And the way in which we solve that, unlike with Desmos, right, we're saying these three categories, as soon as we see one of those types of questions, we're going to go straight to Desmos and enter that equation into Desmos and then go from there. When it comes to diagram questions, we are going to redraw, right? Because again, this is a digital test. So you need to redraw this on your scratch paper. So I'll just say redraw. And then we're going to also label, right? So we're going to label that diagram on your scratch paper with any provided information, as well as any other relevant information that you know. And then we're going to try to solve from there. So these are the two categories. With a ton of success, most students, again, that have come to me over the last month or two, especially in the 400s, I had a student that scored like literally a 390 on math and she is now consistently 650 easy by only focusing on these two types of questions. So let's see how we apply this on the test. All right, so here's again practice test number 10. Let's jump into it. So we're literally, guys, we're going to skip every question that doesn't fit into one of our categories. So we can see on the screen here, question number one. This is what I call a diagram question. This question has let me just write it here. So this question has a visual representation, right? So there is a graph here. So how do I solve this? So I'm going to stop to solve this question. It says the line graph shows a percent of cars for sale at a used car lot on a given day by model year. Whenever there's a diagram provided, it's good, especially for graphs, to look at, well, what's the x-axis? Looks like it's model year. What is the y-axis? It looks like it is percent of cars for sale. The question says for what model year is the percent of cars for sale the smallest? Well, obviously that means we're going for the lowest percentage there, which lines up with right below 5%, which looks at 4%. And that in terms of the year lines up with the year 2014. So we know that our answer here is 2014. Okay. So we've now answered that question fairly quickly. Let's move on to question number two. Question number two is also a diagram question. Whenever I see a linear graph, there's a few things I pay attention to that I suggest you also pay attention to. One, is the y-intercepts. So we see that this graph has a y-intercept at 3. We see that this graph has a y-intercept at -2. Secondarily, the x-intercepts. We see that this has an x-intercept somewhere between 1 and 2. This has an x-intercept somewhere between -3 and -2. And then lastly is the point of intersection, when especially if you have two lines, right? So if you have two lines, the point of intersection is always going to be important to pay attention to. And in this case, that point of intersection happens right there, which looks like it's at the point 4 comma -5. So this question says the graph of a system of linear equations is shown. What is the solution xy to the system? So the solution for a system of equations will always be where the two lines intersect. And therefore, because we've already identified that, we know that that's happening at the point 4, -5. So our answer here is choice A. Perfect. Let's move on. So question number 3, perfect. This is a big word problem. Actually, I didn't mention this in the notes in the beginning. This is a question that I might have a student answer. Here's my reasoning. So while it is a word problem and while it does not have an equation in the question or on top of the question, which would lead us down the path of Desmos, and definitely, obviously, it's not a diagram question, we do have inequalities in the answer choices, which means I still may be able to use, or I should say, I still can use Desmos to answer this question. So I'm going to take a look at this. The total cost in dollars to rent a surfboard consists of a $25 service fee and a $10 per hour rental fee. A person rents a surfboard for T hours and intends to spend a maximum of $75 to rent the surfboard. Which inequality represents this situation? All right, so just to be fair, I think this is not a very difficult question, but it doesn't fit as nicely into the strategies that I want us to focus on right now for a layer 1 for this, so I'm going to actually skip it. So let's go to question number 4. Question 4 is, again, what do we see? Another diagram question. So again, we have a parabola this time, but like I mentioned to you, in all graph questions, we're looking at what the y-intercept is, which looks like it crosses somewhere between 2 and 3 right there. And for parabolas, it's also very valuable to find where's the vertex. So our vertex here is at 2, -2. So this question says the graph shown will be translated up 4 units. Which of the following will be the resulting graph? So what I like to do again is when I see that this is, when I just pay attention to the description, we're looking at the vertex. We know that we're shifting up 4 units, which means if I'm starting at -2, that vertex should now be here, and my parabola will face up from there. Again, I would just draw this down on my scratch paper. So I now know that the vertex for my answer better be at 2, 2. I think this question has graph answer choices. Yes, it does. So we can see for choice A, let me just get rid of my drawing. We can see for choice A, the vertex is at 2, 2, which is nice. I'm not going to say that that's the right answer yet. I'm going to check the other ones. For choice B, it's not at 2, 2, so that's definitely making choice B incorrect. Choice C is also not there, and choice D is also not there, which means choice A must be the correct answer. Just that easy, guys. Diagram questions, I really love them because our brains digest information in pictures much faster than it does information that we need to read. So it's a quick and fast way to find information, answer a question visually without having to really do a lot of math work on paper or a lot of reading. So that's question number 4. Let's go to question number 5. Question number 5, here we go. So here we do have this short passage, but there's an equation in front. What I mentioned up front is that anytime we have a double or 2 variable question, we want to put that into Desmos. I don't want S and T though, right? So let's call this y equals 40 plus 3x. So the only thing I need to make sure of is that my S and my y relate to each other, given what the question tells me S represents, and that my T and my X relate to each other, given what the question tells me T represents. So I'm going to read this really quickly. The equation gives the speed S, so now I know that y is speed in miles per hour of a certain car T seconds after it began to accelerate. What is the speed in miles per hour of the car 5 seconds after it began to accelerate? So before I even throw this into Desmos, the fastest, easiest way to solve this question is the fact that the question does tell us that t is equal to 5, right? So while I'm going to use the strategy of Desmos, I actually think the strategy that I teach called plug in information from the question, PIQ, is a much faster path here. Because if we know that t is 5 and the question is asking for s, then we're just saying s is equal to 40 plus 3 times 5, and 3 times 5 is 15. 40 plus 15 is 55, and therefore our answer is choice D. But let's say you didn't notice that. So I'm going to go to Desmos now, and I'm instead of saying S equals 40 plus 3t, I'm going to say Y equals 40 plus 3x. We see that my graph shows up. There it is. And what's the question want me to find out? It wants me to know what's happening when t is 5, which again, I've converted into x being 5. So I just go to my graph. I'm going to follow my graph here until I get an x value of 5. And let's see, I scroll down. I'm at 5.27, 5.07, and there it is, 5, comma 55. So when x is 5, y is 55. You can see that that answer was on the screen from Desmos very fast. We got there very quickly, maybe about the same amount of time as plugging in the answer from or plugging in the information from the question. But again, I like the strategy using Desmos in this case because when I tell students just always use Desmos anytime you see a question like this, they really just appreciate not having to think hard about it. No thought process. Anytime you see equation on top of a word problem, you just immediately plug that equation into Desmos. Then you read the question, and typically it'll work out for you. All right, so that's question number 5. So question number 6, here we go. We have a function, right? So again, this question number 6, again, if I go straight to Desmos with this one, I'm going to say that that is f of x is equal to x squared plus x plus 71. So my graph, I'm going to just zoom out. There's my graph. What do I want to know? The question says, what is the value of f of 2? Once again, I go on my graph. And okay, that's 0, 71. Let's see, 3.3. So I just want when x is equal to 2. I follow that down, and it looks like when x is equal to 2, y is equal to 77. We see that clearly on Desmos. There it is, when x is equal to 2, y is 77. Therefore, the correct answer to this question would be 77. So you can see how easy that was with Desmos. Again, just because I would be remiss not to mention it, there is an easy way as well on top of the Desmos strategy to answer this question. Anytime we see a question that says f of a number, right, like f of 2, all we're doing is taking that 2 and plugging it in for x, which means we have a 2 squared plus 2 plus 71. 2 squared is 4 plus 2 plus 71. 4 plus 2 is 6 plus 71 equals 77. That's our answer. So there you go. 2 different ways to answer that question. All right, let's keep going. Number 7, word problem. Completely skipping it. Not in our wheelhouse right now for getting that 650 and not wasting our time. Again, even for students who are looking to get beyond a 650, it's a good strategy for just building confidence. Just skip over these long ones, do the short ones, and you can come back and look at those later on if you like. Number 8, this is technically a diagram question, right? So we have a table provided here. So I would stop to look at this. It's a longer question, but I would at least stop to look at it. Again, whenever I have a diagram, I am paying attention to, what's this diagram all about? What is the table telling me? So this table is telling me that I have a mascot and I have grade levels. And it looks like I have 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, and then total numbers here. So I like to do something that I call the pinpoint method. So pinpoint method means especially when you have a table, sometimes with a graph as well, just choose one number. So let's choose that 4. Describe what that 4 represents. So that 4 right there is saying that there are 4 8th grade Longhorn mascots. I think. Again, I haven't read the whole thing, but that 4 definitely aligns with 8th grade and it aligns with the Longhorn mascot. So I believe I understand how to read this table. Then we go and actually read the table. The table gives a distribution of votes for a new school mascot and grade level for 80 students, right? New school, okay, these are votes. So that 4 represents there were 4 votes from the 8th grade that voted for the Longhorn to be the new school mascot. That's how we would actually translate that when we do pinpoint method. So the rest of the question says, if one of these students is selected at random, what is the probability of selecting a student whose vote for new mascot was for a lion? All right, so not our typical diagram question. It really comes down to, do you understand what the word probability means? I'm going to tell you. If you don't know, right, if you were doing this without me sitting here with you, this will be one that you would skip and say, yep, I tried it. It was diagram. I at least looked at it, but I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm going to move on. However, you are here with me. So thank you, and lucky you for being here with me. Probability on this test will always mean what you want divided by what you have. Okay. So what do we want? We want we want the probability of selecting a student whose vote for new mascot was for a lion. How many students voted for the mascot to be a lion? 20 of them, right? There were 9 in 6th grade, 2 in 7th grade, and 9 in 8th grade, so a total of 20. So what we want is represented by 20. What do we have? Well, we have 80 students, right? So 20 students out of the total of 80 students that we have voted for the lion to be the mascot. We simplify this fraction, and what you will find is that 20 divided by 80 is 1 over 4. And that's why the answer here is choice C. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, it's a question that I'm happy to skip if I'm not super confident in how to find probability, but it's also a question where I think, probability questions aren't so bad. So better to teach you in this situation than to skip over it. All right, let's keep going. So we're at question number 9. This is not a Desmos question. It is not a diagram question. So we move on. Of course, I have a strategy for that. I will leave these questions for part 2 of the videos for those who are like definitely looking to 700 minimum consistently. This is definitely one of those questions. I'll give you a little bit of a nod because it's hard for me to move on, but this is what I call a plug-in picture question because it describes something that can be drawn, right? So anytime you see a question like that where you're reading a description of what can be drawn, please draw it. Do not just mentalize what the question is describing. Draw it, label it out, and it'll be hugely successful and helpful for you. But for now, we're skipping that because this video is about, getting these lower level questions first. All right, so here we have question number 10. So question number 10, definitely something we want to do. There's a single variable equation, 4x plus 2 equals 12. Again, I know I can simplify that, but I'm going to just type it in as is. So 4x plus 2 equals 12. And we have this equation. Let me just zoom in, or you have this graph. Looks like I have, oops, I put 4xx, didn't I? Get rid of that x. There we go. So the solution here, so the solution to an equation, a single variable equation, when you put it into Desmos to graph it, the solution is at the x-intercept. So that's important to know. We've seen already on a graph question that when you have a system of equations, or you have 2 graphs, or more than 1 graph, basically, the solution is where those lines intersect, where they intercept each other. But if you have a single equation with a single variable, the solution is at the x-intercept. So we can see that x is equal to 2.5 here. But what's the question asking for, right? So I don't know if that's all the question wants. Well, the question wants the value of 16x plus 8. All right, so I'm going to say, let's see what happens if I say 16x plus 8. And let's go down. That gives me, oh, look at that. So it intersects right there at 48, right? So all I did was type in the equation that was provided to me, the 4x plus 2 equals 12. I then also plugged in the expression that was provided to me that the question's asking me to find. And I go to Desmos with both, and I see that they intersect right there at 2.5 comma 48, which means that our answer to this question is 48, which is choice B. Perfect. I hope that makes sense. And you can see the value of using Desmos. And of course, there are other ways to solve this as well. But given what we're discussing today, this is how I'd like us to go through it. Question number 11. This is not an equation. This is a whole separate strategy here. In fact, there's two strategies I can give you, but we're skipping that for right now. Stay tuned for another video on that one. 12, we're going to skip as well because that doesn't fit into Desmos or our diagram questions. Number 13 does fit into Desmos, right? We have a system of equations. So we're going to just plug those straight in. So 3x plus 6 equals 4y, and 3x plus 4 equals 2y. And looks like they cross each other right there. Let me just zoom in to make sure that that's where they're crossing. Yeah, there we go. Looks like they intersect right there at that negative 0.666667, comma 1. The question says the solution to the given system of equations is xy. What is the value of y? Well, our value of y is negative 0.6667, so that becomes our answer, right? So we would just say for number 13 that y is equal to negative 0.66. I just probably put 7 like that. I think, let's see, if I were to type that in, point 66667, enter. If I were to go back and make, so you see this graph, or I'm sorry, this fraction button here. I turn that to a fraction, didn't, so don't really like it. All right, so then I think that this is good enough. Just use it as is. Yeah, we'll just call it negative 0.6667. So I think that should be good enough. All right, perfect. So moving on. Are there any other questions here? Number 14 is a yes. Number 14 does have an equation involved. So I would take a look at it and see if it's a Desmos question. The function f is defined by that in the xy plane, the graph of y equals g of x as a result of translating the graph of y equals f of x 4 units. What is the value of g of 0? So I would actually do this one. Again, we're saying that really any question that has a equation in it, we're going to try Desmos. So let's just do that. Let's try it. So I'm going to put in f of x equals x minus 6 and x minus 2 and x plus 6. So we have this graph. Let's zoom out to really see it. It's a single graph. So again, we're paying attention to the x-intercepts. So we have negative 6, 2, and positive 6. The question says that what's happening? This is f of x, but g of x is translating the graph of f of x up 4 units. So what's the value of g of 0? Well, what we're going to find out is, well, what's f of 0? So f of 0 is, let's find that. F of 0 looks like it's here, right there. So f of 0 is 72. So if we're looking for g of 0, and we know that the g of x function is just the f of x function shifted up, right? I'll draw it on screen, shifted up 4 units. Then if we're at 72 here, then our answer should be 76, right? Which would be a 76. So that's our answer for question 14. The answer is 76 because f of 0 was 72 and we're just shifting up 4 units to 76. Let's move on. So let's get rid of that off the screen. So let's see number 15. 15 also has an equation. So let's see, f of w equals 6w squared. I tend to not use anything outside of x and y on Desmos, so I'm just call this f of x equals 6x squared. And we see that's our graph there. So at least now we have a visual. So the function f of w equals 6w squared gives the area of a rectangle in square feet if its width is w and its length is 6 times its width. Which of the following is the best interpretation of f of 14 equals 1,176? All right, so again, I graphed it. I don't think Desmos is all that helpful here. I do know that it's asking for f of 14. I could go and find that. I'm pretty sure that it's just going to be exactly what they said it was, which is that it's the 1,176 number, which is way up here. So I'm going to not, in fact, waste my time doing that. So the question just becomes what it means. And again, I think this is out the purview of what we care about today, at least. So I'm not going to do that one. So we skip that one. And then let's go to find 16. So there's number 16. 16 is, you can see that the answer choices are things that we could put into Desmos, right? We have these y equals 44,000 and t, and I can just switch out t with x. So I will read this one. The number of bacteria in a liquid medium doubles every day. There are 44,000 bacteria in the liquid medium at the start of an observation. Which of the following represents the number of bacteria Y? Okay, it's important. So the Y value, when we plug this into Desmos, will give us the number of bacteria in the liquid medium T days after the start of the observation. Well, again, so this is a bit interesting. Um, the question says there are 44,000 bacteria in the liquid medium at the start of an observation. So again, I think this is outside our purview. It's hard for me to not answer this, but we're going to move on from this one. That's not within our regular diagram or Desmos. Number 17. So number 17 here, this is also considered to be a diagram question. We have a table. So just so that you know on Desmos, you can enter information from a table. So I'm going to enter that information here. We have 0 and 1.23, and we have 2 and 1.54, and we have 4 and 1.94, and I can just connect those dots there. The question actually gives me the equation here. I don't think that's what this is looking for, though. Looks like it's a little bit different. This is a linear regression. Looks like I want something quadratic here. Still doesn't look exactly the same, but let's see. The table shows the exponential relationship between the number of years X since Hannah started training in pole vault and the estimated height H of X in meters of her best pole vault for that year. Which of the following functions best represents this relationship where X is less than or equal to 4? Again, I think we can solve it. It's not fast, quick, and easy, so I'm not gonna do that right now. We're gonna skip over that one right now. What was that? This is number 17. Number 18 has an equation as well. I mean, when you start doing this strategy, you start to notice that there are so many questions that have equations, right? So while this is a longer one, let's just read it. The function h is defined by that. The graph of y equals h of x, and the xy plane has an x-intercept at a0. Oh, I love these questions. So because we're going to go straight to Desmos, I'm going to call this f of x instead of h of x. I don't think it really matters. But 4x plus 28. I'm going to zoom out, right? And then what does the question say? It says the graph of y equals h of x in the xy plane has an x-intercept at a0. So many students see that and they get confused. Well, if you go to Desmos and you plug it in, you see, well, oh, actually my x-intercept is at -7, 0, which means that this a0 is actually -7, 0. So that tells me that a equals -7. That's what Desmos just told me. Then it says, and a y-intercept at 0b. All right, well, what's the y-intercept? It looks like the y-intercept is right here at 0.28, which tells me that b is equal to 28. This is a beautiful Desmos question. It directly tells us all that we need to know here. And then it says, where a and b are constants, what is the value of a plus b, right? So we're literally just figuring out what -7 plus 28 is, which we know to be 21, and therefore the answer is choice A. All right, so that one's done. Let's move on. Number 19 has an inequality. We can also graph inequalities on here. So I'm going to say y is less than 5x plus 6. There's my inequality. Let me just zoom out so you can see that. It says, for which of the following tables are all the values of x and their corresponding values of y solutions to the given inequality? Well, solutions to an inequality means that they're inside of the shaded region of the graph. So we're going to look for that. And it says that, let's see, choice A, 317. Let's just zoom in, because these are smaller numbers. So is 317 inside of here? Let's see, when x is 3, let me just zoom in more even. Zoom in a bit more. Okay. So when x is 3, x is here, and 317, 2.6. Looks like it. Looks like when x is 3, our y value is higher than 17, right? So that means when x is 3, y equals, y equaling 17. Yeah. So when on our graph, when x is 3, y is 21, which means the point 317 is like down here somewhere. So that actually does work. And going back to my equation, looks like they all have 317 except for C, which is 325. So C is outside of the range, and D, 321, is also outside of the range. So I know 317 works. So A and B are possibilities. Let's say about 5. So choice A says 527. Let me just continue to follow this up. All right, let's just zoom down and okay, there we go. So on my graph, I see that 5 hits at 31. So 527 would be within the shaded region, but 535 would be outside of it. So that therefore choice A is correct, right? Because again, 3 and 17 was inside the shaded region, and 527 was also inside the shaded region. So that's how we find our answer there. So let's move on from there. And number 20, perfect. System of equations. So we're going to go straight to y equals 4x plus 1 and 4y equals 15x minus 8. And let's zoom out. Looks like they cross each other down here somewhere. Again, we're always looking for the point of intersection when we have a system of equations. I can't really tell. So I'm trying to zoom out and move my graph around to find where, where are these two lines crossing each other? So I'm just moving it around. Looks like it's happening somewhere around here. Okay, perfect. Looks like it found it for me right there. -12, -47. So this question says, as a solution to the given system of equations is xy, what is the value of x minus y? Well, we know that they intersect at x equals -12. So we have -12 minus -47. So -12 minus -47, which becomes -12 plus 47, which is equal to positive 35. So that would be our answer. Again, all found by plugging into Desmos and just plugging those numbers in that we find for the point of intersection, which is great. Okay. So let's keep it moving. So that's question number 20. Question 21 looks again like a plug-in picture question. We're not doing that. 22, there's no equations there, so we're not doing that. 23, all the answer choices are equations. So let's take a look at it. So 23 says, which of the following equations represents a circle in the xy plane that intersects the y-axis at exactly one point? Very interesting. I love these questions. Basically, what this means is that every answer choice will go into Desmos, right? So when I try choice A, x minus 8 squared plus y minus 8 squared equals 16. I'm going to get a graph. I'm going to get a circle. Where's my circle? Let me zoom out to find it. There's my circle. Okay. But the question tells me that the circle should intersect the y-axis at exactly one point. It does not, which means that choice A is not correct, right? So I'm just going to make sure that we're following the instructions there. So now I'm going to try choice B. Choice B also has an x minus 8. Instead of a y minus 8, it has a y minus 4. So I just switch that out. It keeps that 16. Oh, what do we know? Here, it is touching the x-axis at one point. But again, our question says that it should intersect the y-axis at exactly one point, which means choice B is also wrong, right? So that's good to know. So that's gone. So now choice C, instead of x minus 8, it's x minus 4. And instead of y minus 4, it's y minus 9. That is it, right? There we go. That circle touches our y-axis at exactly one point right there, right? It touches exactly at one point right here. So choice C better be the right answer. On a real test, I probably would just go with it. Let's just make sure though. So choice D, we come in and we just say we only have x squared here, and then y minus 9 squared equals 16. As we can see, obviously it touches the y-axis at two different places. So that's not correct. So our answer here is visibly choice C, visually choice C. So that's perfect. Let's continue on. Question 24, no diagram, no equation, so we're not doing that one. Lost my place. And that was 24. And let's see, 25, the result of increasing, nope, that's not an equation. 26, the answers have equations. So again, let's check it out at least. 26, a window repair specialist charges $220 for the first 2 hours of repair plus an hourly fee. I'm going to just skip over that one. This is, again, very possible. Most likely I'll put it in my second video, but I'm going to really try in this video to stick solely to the types of questions that I mentioned up front, which look more like 27, right? Where you have the equation up top, then you have some words, right? So for 27, I'm not going to even read it yet. I'm going to go straight to Desmos, x parentheses x plus 1 minus 56 equals 4x parentheses x minus 7 close parentheses. It's a single equation question, which means we go to our x-intercept to find the solution. So we know that x is 2.6667. However, the question says, what is the sum of solutions? So let me zoom out. There must be another solution. There it is. So we have two solutions here. We have this 2.66667, and we have 7. We want the sum of those solutions, which means all I'm going to do is say that this is 2.6. How many sixes? I have 4 sixes. 6, 6, 6, 7 plus 7, which is answer to be 9.6667. You will not have that much space to put into your answers. So we're going to just say the answer is 9.667, right? So that would be our final answer. Okay, so that's the end of module 1. Hope you enjoyed the video. I will make a part 2 where we'll go through module 2 from the non-adaptive paper pencil test, 10 directly from the College Board. But hopefully you can see we answered quite a few questions here without getting bogged down by any of the word problems. And again, just to reiterate, all of my students who have come to me in the last 2 months struggling to get over a 400, over a 500, I have put them on this exact same plan of just go through every question, find the questions that contain equations in the question first and foremost. We see that there are possibilities where we're graphing equations from the answer choices, which is a great kind of like, part 1B to all of this. But to start off with, we're going short questions that have equations in the question, as well as diagram questions where we have some visual input that we can use in order to answer our questions. If you can get through all of those first, and even if you guess on the rest, I promise you, if you're struggling to get over a 400 or over a 500, you will get that score, right? Just, I promise you, you will, right? So take my word for it, work on Desmos as you can, and catch me on part 2 of this video. All right. Thank you guys for paying attention. Talk to you soon.